The question is, what do I think about U.S. agricultural policy? And the questioner pointed out that we've got a patchwork that is riddled with special interest legislation and provisions, as opposed to a coherent policy that's designed to ensure our not only that we have plentiful food supplies, but also high quality, that we are safe, and that the ways of life of family farmers are preserved. So here's my general philosophy. If you want, by the way, a very detailed analysis of my rural agenda that includes my approach to agricultural policy, go on my website, braakobama.com. But my general philosophy is our first job is to ensure that our farmers, the best farmers in the world, are provided with the backstop, the support, so that if their market forces out of their control or weather patterns that are out of their control, that they don't go under, that they are able to work hard and be profitable. But my emphasis there is on family farms, because agribusiness, frankly, is doing just fine, and they don't need help. And so when it comes to our subsidy programs, for example, the notion that big multi-billion-dollar operations should be getting subsidies from taxpayers while family farmers are finding it harder and harder to make it just doesn't make any sense. And that's an area that I want to see some significant adjustment in. I think we have to cap the levels at which people get support. That's point number one. Point number two, I think it is very important for us to encourage agricultural policies that are consistent with conservation. And we do not do enough to reward farmers for doing the right thing. And part of that is because special interest legislation that encourages them to engage oftentimes in policies that are not good for the land and are not sustainable over the long term. And so I want to put more money into conservation proposals that will ensure sustainable agriculture. That's point number two. Point number three, and these are all consistent, by the way. Point number three is that our food, we should be thinking about how can we encourage those farmers who are growing crops that result in healthy food. So, although, now listen, I'll be honest, I come from a farm state, Illinois, and we have a lot of corn. And so, understandably, I'm supportive of corn. I believe in beans. Beans and corn are good things. But when all the subsidies are going to corn producers and bean producers, and, for example, fruit and vegetable producers aren't getting support, then what you see are a skewing of investments in favor of those crops, and as a consequence, sometimes we don't have the same kinds of healthy choices for consumers that we need. And you know, there's a reason why our obesity rates have skyrocketed, and that's part of what's driving the huge inflation in our healthcare costs. And so to the extent that we're encouraging local producers who are selling in local markets, fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, all those things can make an incredible difference in our health and help. And the nice thing is, you know, that's where local producers, smaller producers, can be especially successful. And so that's a shift in our agricultural policy that I'd like to see. Now, there's some of these provisions, good provisions, are in this Farm Bill that's coming up, and some of the Farm Bill is not so good. It is a real mixed bag. So we're in the process of analyzing the Farm Bill to see what my position is going to be, but it's not what I would craft as President of the United States, because I think it is tilted too far in favor of the status quo and big agribusiness and the same kinds of approaches that have resulted in an unbalanced agricultural policy. All right? Okay. Young man back there, he's had his hand up for a long time. Can we get a mic? There you go. See, that's what I'm talking about. There we go. All right, go ahead. What's your name?
My name is John, and I would like to begin by thanking you for your honesty in this campaign.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
After all, a politician is someone who tells the American people what he or she thinks they want to hear. A leader is someone who tells the people what they need to hear.
There you go. Trying to lead.
And on that vein, I'm wondering what sacrifices you are willing to ask the American people in order to bring about your brighter vision of America's future.
Well, I'll give you two examples. Example number one relates to your age group. You look like you already in college, so almost in college, sort of thinking about college.
Some in, some out.
In and out of college, but you're in that age range. I mentioned that I want to make college affordable. Number one, by expanding the Pell Grant for young people who have no access to parental resources. Number two, by lowering interest rates on federally guaranteed student loans. And by the way, in order to pay for that, all we have to do, or one of the main things we can do, is to cut out the middleman. Banks and financial institutions who are making billions of dollars of profits on student loans, let's make those loans directly to the students and save those billions of dollars to lower those interest rates. That would be a smart thing to do. But the third thing I've said is I want to give a $4,000 tuition credit every student every year, so that they start off with about 2/3 of their college education, if they're going to a public university, paid for. Sounds good. But what I said also is, in exchange for that money, I want young people to be involved in some form of national service. You can do it while you're in school, or you can wait till after your school, but you will work in a homeless shelter or a veterans home, or join the Peace Corps, or join the Foreign Service. We'll invest in you, you invest in America, and that way we'll move the country forward. So that's sacrifice number one. Nothing's for free. Now, the second example I want to use is the energy example that we've already talked about a little bit. If we're going to get serious and cap the emission of greenhouse gases that are causing global warming, then we are going to be having power plants have to figure out how they're going to reduce their carbon, because they'll have to pay penalties if they exceed the cap. And that means that they're going to have to change how their power plants operate. And that means, in turn, that they'll have to make investments that they will try to pass on to consumers, and could result in higher electricity prices. Now, over the long term, what happens is that technology catches up and those electricity prices go down. In the short term, though, people individually who can afford it, and the government will help, but we're going to all have to be more energy efficient. We're going to have to insulate our homes, change our light bulbs. We will take some of the money that we're using, that we've obtained from the cap and trade system, to help subsidize people who are poor, people on fixed incomes, to make sure they're protected from spikes in electricity. But over the long term, if we're serious about global warming, we have to reduce our carbon footprint, and that means that we have to be more efficient about how we use energy. It doesn't mean our living standards go down. It just means that we are making more intelligent decisions about our energy utilization. The same is true when it comes to the transportation sector. I mean, not only do we have to invest in mass transit, but we also have to make sure that that people are making good decisions about cars. And they're free to, people are free to buy a Suburban if you want that gets 8 miles a gallon. But we can't subsidize to make sure that you are able to fill up your suburban tank at a really cheap rate, because that's not the trajectory of oil prices worldwide. And anybody who tells you that we can drill our way out of the problem on this, they're just not telling you the truth. I mean, we use 25% of the world's oil. We use 25% of the world's oil, and we account for about 3% of the world's oil reserves. So, and China and India, they are going to start getting cars. And so if we think that we're going to be able to just keep on moseying along with our SUVs without changing our habits, that's just not true. And the president's going to have to talk about that. We have to, again, make sure that those who are in vulnerable positions are not burdened as we make these transitions to a more energy efficient future. But we can't shy away from that energy efficient future. And in fact, if we embrace it, we will be at the cutting edge. We will create jobs here in the United States. We will create technologies that we can license and export to other countries. It will be what drives this economy in the 21st century, but we've got to get out in front of it and not wait for it to happen to us. All right. It's a girl's turn. All right, there's somebody right there back near the mic who's been waiting a long time. Who had their hand up first? One, I think it was that. Well, she's grabbing it anyway, so go ahead.
I'm raring to go because I'm a local Obama mama. But my question, I'll get right to the question. Because the media hasn't covered so many of the issues, I'm a little bit hazy on how you feel about two things that are related.
Okay.
You have kind of answered some of that about power plant, the fact that maybe nuclear power might be an option that's still on the table. But my main question is, I want to know how you feel about the use of depleted uranium, which we've been using since the Gulf War and in Afghanistan, in Iraq currently. And also, I want to know what you feel about the continued production of depleted uranium.
Well, you know, this is an issue that's been raised by a number of people, and it poses significant risks. So what I've said is that as President of the United States, I will immediately put together a task force to study the effects of depleted uranium, what exposures have already happened, making sure that if exposure has taken place in which people have been injured, that they are properly compensated, and that we are securing this depleted uranium in ways that are scientifically sound. We are going to be producing uranium for technological purposes, but and the fact is that we're going to need some of it for our existing nuclear industry, as well as for, in some cases, weapons production. That's not something that I am wild about, but it's a fact of life. What we can do, though, is make sure that it's used properly. And that's something that I will make sure happens. Now, let me make a broader point about, because you mentioned nuclear energy. There are some people whose attitude is nuclear energy is terrible no matter what. My belief about nuclear energy is that if we could find a way to use nuclear energy in which we had safely stored all the radioactive material, and it wasn't a threat from terrorists, and it didn't cost billions of dollars in cost overruns to build a plant, then sure, why not? Because, in fact, it doesn't produce greenhouse gases that are causing global warming. The problem is that right now, that's not where the nuclear industry is. And so my attitude is not ideologically opposed to nuclear power. It is a practical matter that we have not created an industry in this country that is economically sound and actually works, and where we've actually figured out how to store that material in a safe way. So one of the things that we're going to do with the billions of dollars that are generated from the cap and trade, about $150 billion we're going to invest in renewable energy sources, solar, wind, biodiesel, developing an alternative to the internal combustion engine. But also, we should invest in at least the research and development around, are there possible ways of using coal cleanly? Because if they're not, we shouldn't use it. But if there are, we've got an awful lot of coal in this country. Are there ways of figuring out how to deal with nuclear waste in a way that genuinely is safe? If there aren't, then we shouldn't use it. If there are, obviously we should be open-minded to it. So here's the bottom line. Here's the bottom line is that I will be an administration that is governed by science and not by ideology. And I know that's going to be a big change from what we've had over the last several years, but I really believe in scientific approaches to many of these problems. All right. Let me make sure I'm not biased against this side here. Gentleman with the O shirt there. The OSU for Obama t-shirt. Go ahead. Hold on one second. I got a mic here. Here he is, right back. There you go. Go ahead.
Would you increase the funding for stem cell research?
Yes. Not only would I. Now, the first step. The first step is to sign the bill that authorizes the use of additional stem cell lines that George Bush has vetoed twice now. That is something that we should have done a long time ago. We've got bipartisan support for it, and so we're going to make sure that that happens. And understand what that bill does, by the way, because it's supported by people who are opposed to abortion, but are in favor of this, because it's got very strict guidelines. What it says is you can use only embryos that have been produced for purposes of in vitro fertilization that are about to be discarded. So that, these are embryos that would have been destroyed anyway. It has very strict moral guidelines. I think most of us believe that if something's going to be destroyed anyway, for us to use those potential stem cell lines to figure out possible cures for Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or diabetes, that's a wise decision. But we need to do more than that. We need to do more than that. This goes what I was saying earlier about science. I think we have to double our investment in basic scientific research. That is how an economy is going to move forward in this new age. And our investment in basic scientific research has flatlined over the last several years. It's flatlined. It's not kept pace with the demands, both for medical purposes and the seeking of cures, but also from an economic perspective. Because this is what's going to create the innovation and the discovery that will ultimately translate into new jobs here in the United States, here in Oregon. So I want to not only increase funding for basic research, but assure that we've got a pipeline of young scientists and researchers. And that, by the way, also means that we've got to do a better job with science education in our schools and paying our science teachers more so that they are developing the kinds of young people who are engaged and interested in science. We need a bigger supply of scientists and engineers. All right, I feel bad about the folks in the back here, so let's see if there's is there yeah, let's see. Way back. Let's see. There's somebody waving back there, way in the back. But it's a woman's turn, and I confess that I'm getting older here, so I can't tell who all's got their hand up. Yeah, just find a woman back there. There you go. All right, we got one.
Thank you, Mr. Obama. Let me first say that this is the first time I've ever been in a room where I could breathe air with the new President of the United States, and I'm thrilled.
There you go. That's cool.
My name is Gloria, and my question is, what do you plan to do about the terrible situation in Guantanamo Bay?
We are going to close Guantanamo. We're going to close Guantanamo. It, you know, and here's why. You know, I've got a wonderful supporter and colleague, Christopher Dodd. You'll remember he was one of my competitors in this race for the nomination. And Chris Dodd's father helped set up the Nuremberg trials. You think about this. These were some of the worst war criminals in history, you know, having helped to perpetrate the Holocaust. And yet, after we had defeated Hitler and captured these war criminals, we didn't just take them out back and shoot them. We didn't lock them up and torture them. We put them on trial before the world community. And it set a standard for the idea of rule of law, the idea that there are certain principles that even in the midst of war, we will observe. And you know, when I see this administration say that the Geneva Conventions may not apply, when I see this administration undermining our basic civil liberties with things like warrantless wiretaps, when there are perfectly adequate systems set up to ensure that our executive branch has the sufficient authority to go after terrorists and do so in a constitutional way. When I read about detainees in Guantanamo who are never getting the hearings that are serious, that would meet the standards of due process, then I say we've betrayed our ideals. And when we betray our ideals, then we are losing exactly that thing that gives us moral force and authority in the world, and that allows us to mobilize allies and allows us to generate sympathy that translates into us being able to make ourselves safer. So not only is it the wrong thing to do, but it's also an impractical thing to do. And that's why we are going to close Guantanamo, restore habeas corpus, and you'll have a president who's taught the Constitution and who believes in the Constitution and will obey the Constitution of the United States of America when I'm president of the United States. All right, we got a veteran back here.
Senator, I'd like to shake your hand, sir. Okay. Senator, the one thing that we can truly be grateful in this nation is that the wars of the world have been elsewhere. We need a strong president. I served under many during 20 years in the Navy, and I have a genuine respect for each and every branch of the service, because I, as a sailor, could not do my job unless the gentleman over there in the Army did his. The Air Force, the Coast Guard, the National Guard, and the Marines. On the carrier Nimitz, we had a detachment of 80 Marines. They were wonderful people. But, you know, I was in the invasion of Grenada in October 1983. And as it's gone.
Sorry, I'll hold it at the top, not at the bottom.
Okay. As a cook in the Navy, I was assigned to cook a meal for the 82nd Airborne, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, the initial force in the invasion. And it was one of my proudest moments to do that. One of the Army guys, he said, "Why are you doing this?" And I said, "Well, I was ordered to, but I volunteered at the same time." He said, "Why?" He says, "We're Army, you're Navy." I said, "Buddy, what is our common bond?" He'd stop for a minute, and I gave him the answer. The American flag. It belongs to all of us, not the Army, not the Navy. But many of them, like me, I served in Vietnam in 1970. I came back looking okay. My body looked normal, but deep inside I was hurt. And to this day, I still am hurt because people blamed us for the war. They're blaming for Iraq right now. And yet we served with honor. We did what we were told. And people just went on. So these people are going through the VA system right now. And the kind of people that you need to run the VA is the kind of people that are running this campaign in Oregon and throughout the United States.
Well, listen. I very much appreciate your service, first of all, and I think everybody here does. So, and if I can just humbly disagree with you a little bit, I think one of the things that we've seen a change in, which is a very positive change, you know, back during the Vietnam era, because people objected to the war, there were a lot of people who treated our veterans in a very shabby way. And I'm very proud of the fact that, you know, I have been out here for 5 years now since this war began, watching the American people, and people who have vigorously opposed this war, I think, have also constantly stated their respect and their reverence for our troops, and that's a positive thing. That's a good thing. You know, I think that's a good thing. So, but so people respect you. People respect you, but you know, unfortunately, we also have seen an administration shortchange the VA. That's just a fact. I'm on the Veterans Affairs Committee, and there have been times where the VA secretary comes to us with a budget, and we have to tell him, this is short. This is not enough to deal with all the needs of troops coming home. And they says, no. This is fine. And then halfway into the year, they come back and they say, you know, we fell short by $1 billion. Because they didn't do proper planning, or they were trying to lowball the actual costs and consequences of this war. So let me just say this. As Commander-in-Chief, my job will be to keep the American people safe. I will do whatever's required to keep the American people safe. But what I also insist on is that keeping the American people safe means training our troops properly, equipping them properly, putting them on proper rotations, using our military wisely, not sending them into wars that don't need to be fought, and making sure that our troops are treated properly when they come home. And so we are going to make sure that there's screening for every veteran. Not only for physical injuries, but for post-traumatic stress disorder or brain injury, that they are getting the mental health services that they deserve and that they need, that their medical records are transferred promptly to the VA, so there's no begging for disability payments, there's no waiting. We are going to be building more VA clinics so that people have access to high-quality care. We're not going to tolerate facilities like the ones we just saw in Fort Bragg with stopped-up sewage, you know, for our troops when they come home. And we are going to have zero tolerance for homeless veterans. I do not believe that anybody who has fought on behalf of the United States of America should be ending up on the streets because we didn't give them the counseling and the shelter that they needed. That's an outrage that will end when I'm President of the United States of America. All right, guys. Okay, now, remember I promised I wouldn't be able to get to every question? I'm not going to be able to get to every question. I only have time for one more. And it's a woman, so all the guys put your hands down. All right. This young lady right here in the orange. A bunch of people were pointing at her, so she had a little peanut gallery there working for her.
Thank you, Senator. This is your peanut gallery.
There you go.
Hey, my question is about early childhood education and support services for our children. I have not heard any clear commitment to look at restoring Head Start, Even Start, early childhood initiatives that help promote our youngest and most vulnerable
Well,
population.
hold on a second. That's because you weren't listening to my speech in the
I
beginning.
heard part of it, but I
just
did not
said-
hear a commitment
I
of
just said-
investment of how much are we going to be willing to put towards our most vulnerable population.
Okay.
When I see these young people
All right,
here supporting.
well, I'll repeat. I am going to invest in early childhood education. I am going to put billions of dollars into early childhood education. Oh, you just wanted me to say billions, huh? This is a serious topic, though. We do have an achievement gap in this country. And when you look at the data, the biggest problem is so many of our kids are starting school already behind. Kids in inner cities, kids on Native American reservations, kids in barrios, kids in rural Appalachia. They've got smaller vocabularies. They don't know their numbers, their letters, their colors. So they start. Well, I'm going to talk about that later. So they start because 2-year-olds aren't. That's not the problem. They start behind already, and if we can get to parents early and work with them, not just pre-K, but actually have programs where teachers and social workers or nurses are working with parents that we know are at risk, and have them visit with those parents and give them books and give them educational toys and work with them, then we can close that achievement gap. And every dollar you invest in early childhood education, you get at least $7 back in improved reading scores, reduced dropout rates, reduced delinquency rates, and that makes an enormous difference in the lives of our children. But we've got to be serious about that commitment. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier. Government's job is not to solve every problem. For example, we can't solve all the education problems unless parents parent and turn off the television set and put away the video games and instill a thirst for knowledge in our kids. But what government can do is it can make sure that everybody's got the tools to succeed if they try. That will be my job as president, is to make sure that the environment is such where if you try, if you work hard, you can achieve your American dream. You know, there will be bumps on the road. Things aren't going to go perfect, but, you know, at the end of the day, you're going to be able to say, you know, I can make it, and my kids can make it, and my grandkids can make it, and they're going to have a sustainable economy and a sustainable environment, and in a sustainable world of which we are proud. That's what we're fighting for. That's what this election's about. So I hope everybody's already voted. If you haven't, go vote right now. And I hope you vote for me, because I'm looking forward to being president of the United States of America. Thank you very much, everybody. God bless you.